"You disappear," she said without blinking. That's when I realized she didn't want a present. She wanted freedom. It started at the kitchen table. Funny how so many endings don't happen in dramatic explosions, but in plain daylight, with the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. That morning, the house was quiet. No arguments, no slammed doors, no chaos. Just the two of us sitting opposite each other like strangers waiting for a bus that never comes. Her birthday was coming up in a week, and I did what I always did. I asked what she wanted. Not because I didn't know how to pick gifts. I did, and I'd done it plenty of times before. Jewelry she said she loved but rarely wore. A weekend trip that she spent scrolling on her phone through. Even a framed photo of us from our early years that she tucked into a drawer after 2 weeks. Every year, I asked anyway, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time she'd tell me something real, something I could give that would matter. I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly, watching her across the table. She barely looked up from her phone when I asked, "So, what do you want for your birthday this year?" She didn't pause, didn't smile, didn't even fake the kind of thoughtfulness people usually summon when asked a question like that. She just tapped the screen once, set her phone down, and said, "You disappear." The words landed flat, without humor, without edge. No smirk to soften them, no laugh to say she was joking. Just 3 syllables dropped into the middle of our breakfast, like she was ordering toast instead of dismantling what was left of our marriage. I sat there, spoon in my hand, listening to the clock tick behind me. It felt like the world was daring me to react, to make sense of it, to ask her what she meant. But I didn't ask, because deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. It wasn't about birthdays. It wasn't about gifts. It was years of erosion. Her sarcasm cutting deeper than she fought, the humiliations she wrapped as jokes, the way she had slowly turned from my partner into my critic. All of it had been leading here, to this table, to this sentence. You disappear. I nodded once, quietly. She picked her phone back up, already scrolling, already moving on, as if the moment hadn't shifted something enormous in me. I realized then that I wasn't her husband anymore, not in the way that mattered. I was an inconvenience, a shadow in her house, something she wanted gone. And for the first time in years, I considered giving her exactly what she asked for. Sarcasm showed up in our marriage the way ivy shows up on a brick wall, pretty at first, then everywhere, and before you know it, the mortar underneath is crumbling. In the beginning, it felt harmless. She was quick, clever, the kind of woman who could turn a mundane moment into a witty aside. I liked that about her. It made rooms feel lighter. It made me feel lighter. I didn't realize then how easily light can be weaponized. We met at a friend's housewarming. Paper plates, warm beer, a lopsided cake. I was working late weeks on a retrofit project back then, crawling through crawl spaces and reading cracked beams like x-rays. She was all bright eyes and fast observations, calling the ugly chandelier Victorian optimism and making everyone laugh. When she turned that energy on me those first months, it was playful. She teased me for the way I stacked dishes with military precision, for how I parked straight even in empty lots. I took it the way it was offered, affection with sharp edges. Years changed the edges. It happened slowly enough that I can forgive myself for missing the shift. A joke about my wardrobe in front of her friends. He'd wear the same navy shirt to our wedding if I let him, followed by a warm squeeze of my arm as if the squeeze erased the sting. A comment at a family barbecue. Ask him to pick a restaurant and he'll build you a spreadsheet. met with laughter, a kiss on my cheek, a refill of my drink. That was the formula. Jab, laugh, touch. As if contact could bleach intent. I told myself I was being sensitive. Guys are supposed to shrug that stuff off, right? She's just joking. She's proud of you. Look how she tells your stories. I let it ride, and the ivy climbed. At a friend's game night, the question on a card asked who in the group would write the most boring memoir. She didn't hesitate. My husband, she said, smiling big so it would land soft, but it would be very reliable. The room laughed. I laughed too, because sometimes the only thing worse than being the punchline is refusing to laugh when everyone else already has. That year, I earned a promotion I'd worked toward for a long time. Project lead on a mid-rise rehab. The kind of assignment that meant someone trusted my calculations more than they trusted gravity. We went out to celebrate. The waiter poured champagne, and she clinked her glass to mine with that same big smile. To my glorified calculator. The table laughed again. I felt my face heat, then cool, the way steel does in a forge. I told myself it was a compliment wrapped in a joke. I told myself a lot of things. Even her captions turned. Photos of me carrying a new couch up our stairs got posted with lines about how I finally lifted something heavier than a spreadsheet. Shots of us at the coast were tagged with "dragged him outside, someone alert the authorities." People responded with laughing emojis and thumbs up. I hit the little heart like everyone else and pretended it didn't matter that the story of me she told the world wasn't the one I recognized. In private, the sarcasm kept its claws. When a faucet leaked and I fixed it, she sent a video to her sister with a running commentary about how I watched 6 tutorials for a 5-minute job. When I made dinner, she called it endearingly bland and suggested a sauce, as if competence for me was always an adorable surprise. None of it was cruel in isolation, but you can drown in an inch of water if you lie in it long enough. Every now and then, I tried to redirect the current. I'd say gently that I'd rather not be roasted in front of people. She'd roll her eyes. "God, you can't take a joke anymore," she'd say. The word joke lengthened until it sounded like a diagnosis. Then came the pat on my shoulder, the peck on my cheek. "See? We're fine. You're fine. Everyone's fine." I became fluent in the language of swallowing. At dinners, I preempted her by mocking myself first. A ridiculous dance where I offered my own throat so she wouldn't come for it. If I seemed to enjoy it, maybe it would sting less. That logic never works. But you convince yourself of strange things in slow-burn situations. You call coping humor. You call erosion banter. Looking back, I can chart the turning points with nauseating clarity. The night she told a table of friends that being married to me was like living with a sensible IKEA instruction manual. Functional, no mystery. The weekend her parents visited, and she narrated my attempts at grilling as if she were hosting a nature documentary. Here we see the cautious male of the species, unsure of fire. Her mother laughed so hard she cried. Her father poured me another beer and looked away. I started to live on delay. I'd come up with the perfect response the next morning, the grown-up version of those arguments you win in the shower long after the crowd has left. The moments kept coming, those little paper cuts. The discomfort became routine, the way a stone becomes smooth under constant water. People think cruelty has to be loud to be real. It doesn't. It can also be polite, grammatically correct, framed with napkin folds and cocktail napkins. It can be dressed in pretty outfits and posted with flattering filters. It can tell you it loves you and then draft you into its content calendar. I wish I could say I put a stop to it. I didn't. I folded myself smaller. I told myself this was adulthood. We rib, we tease, we gently roast, because that's modern love. Ironic, self-aware, quick. I laughed until I started to hear my own voice from far away, like it belonged to some other guy who looked like me. The day she said, "You disappear," I knew those years had been the training ground. The sentence fell out of a mouth that had spent seasons practicing how to turn me into a line. It's not that the moment at the table was so shocking. It was familiar. It was the cleanest, shortest version of what she'd been saying for a long time. I think that's what hurt most. The realization that the ivy hadn't just covered the wall. It had loosened the bricks. I was still standing, yes, but I had allowed the vines to take root on my side too. I had nodded, smiled, gone along. I had let the house I built become a set she performed on. It's easy to mistrust your own memory when the jokes are small. So I did something that felt ridiculous and necessary. I started writing them down, not to keep score, not to present evidence, just to tell myself that I hadn't imagined the pattern. A few lines on my phone after parties, notes in the margins of meeting agendas, scraps of paper in a drawer, little records of laughter that didn't land right. I didn't know then how much I'd need those notes, how they would keep me from rewriting history when the apology tour eventually came, how they'd remind me that endings too can be documented. The kitchen table moment didn't spring from nowhere. It walked in backed by years of easy jokes that always needed me to be the man she could poke and prod without consequence. By the time she asked for her gift, "You disappear," she was simply saying aloud what her jokes had been practicing for. I set my coffee spoon down and watched the ring of brown slowly back to stillness. Calm on the surface, a little whirlpool in the middle. That was us. That was me. And now that I'd named it, I couldn't unsee the pull. Sarcasm might have been the soil, but humiliation was the water that kept her contempt alive. And the thing about water is, it seeps. It finds its way into cracks, into places you thought were solid, until one day you realize the foundation isn't stable anymore. It didn't come in screaming matches. It didn't come in dramatic insults. It came in small, carefully placed cuts that she delivered with a straight face and a sweet tone, always at just the right time to make me look foolish without making her look cruel. Like the time we had dinner with her coworkers. She leaned over with that practiced smile and said, "Oh, don't get him started on construction codes. He'll talk for hours." They laughed politely, and I did what I always did, smiled along, even though what I really heard was, "He's boring. Don't bother listening to him." Or the weekend her sister came over and we were grilling in the backyard. I burned one. She leaned back in her chair, wine glass tilted, and said, "See? Told you he's not exactly Gordon Ramsay." Her sister laughed so hard she snorted. I kept flipping the other steaks, jaw tight, pretending I hadn't heard. But I always heard. That's the thing. When the person who knows you best decides to make you small, their words don't just sting. They stick. They echo. They replay at night when you're staring at the ceiling, wondering when love turned into a performance you couldn't keep up with. It was always in public, rarely just us. When it was us, she didn't need sarcasm. She had silence. But in front of others, that was her stage. That's when she came alive. The sharpest, the funniest, the one with the clever punchlines. And I was her material. The humiliations weren't big enough to defend against. If I pushed back, I looked thin-skinned. If I stayed quiet, I looked like I agreed. It was a trap either way, and she knew it. She thrived in it. I remember one night in particular, her birthday, the year before the birthday. We'd gone out with friends, the usual bar downtown with sticky floors and overpriced cocktails. Someone asked what she wanted as a gift, and she laughed, pointing at me. Him learning how to dance without looking like a malfunctioning robot. The table roared. I laughed too, lifting my glass, but inside, something shifted. I wasn't her partner that night. I was her prop. Humiliation by 1,000 jokes. I think part of me tried to normalize it. Maybe this is just how couples are, I told myself. Maybe I'm too serious. Maybe if I laughed more, it wouldn't hurt. But it always did. And the worst part? The longer it went on, the smaller I became. Not just in her eyes, in mine. I stopped volunteering stories at parties. I stopped sharing victories at work. I stopped talking about the things I loved. I gave her less to weaponize, thinking it would help. But all it did was make me fade. By the time she asked me to disappear for her birthday, I realized she'd been preparing me for that request all along. She'd been training me to be invisible. And the truth? I'd already been halfway gone. They started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself at the time. Everyone deserves a night out now then. Everyone needs to blow off steam. But her nights out stopped being exceptions and slowly became patterns, unchallenged rituals that I learned to live around. At first, it was once every couple of months. She'd get dressed, kiss me on the cheek, and say she was meeting Melissa or Chloe for dinner. I'd nod, tell her to have fun, and settle into the couch with a beer and whatever game was on. She'd come home, smelling of wine and perfume, her laughter carrying into the house as she slipped off her heels. But once every couple of months became once a month. Once a month became every other weekend. By the time the 5th year of our marriage rolled around, it was rare to go 2 weeks without her announcing some girls' night. I didn't fight it. I didn't want to be the jealous husband. I told myself I trusted her, that I wasn't going to be the man who put a leash on his wife's freedom. I sat home in my quiet house, convincing myself she deserved it, even while my gut twisted tighter with every slammed door and every late-night return. The later the nights got, the thinner her excuses became. Lost track of time. Traffic was awful. We ended up at another bar. Always the same tone. Half distracted, half annoyed I'd even asked. And always that smell. Not just wine anymore. Stronger scents. Cologne that wasn't mine. Hugs that lingered too long. Perfumes layered on top of each other like cover stories. I'd lie in bed waiting for the sheets to dip with her weight, only for her to slip in after 2 or 3 in the morning, already asleep before I could form the words I wanted to ask. Sometimes she wouldn't even come to bed. I'd wake up at 6, groggy and heavy, and find her curled up on the couch, still in her dress from the night before, phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. When I asked why, she'd shrug. Didn't want to wake you. She never admitted it, but I saw the shift in her eyes. The sparkle that used to be saved for me was gone, replaced with something restless, hungry, like she was living 2 lives, and the one with me was the one she wanted to escape. And maybe she did. Because the thing about those long nights out is they don't just take her away from home. They leave me sitting in that empty living room, staring at the clock, realizing the truth piece by piece. She wasn't just stepping out for fun. She was stepping out of us. It's one thing when someone argues with you, rolls their eyes at you, even mocks you in front of friends. At least then you're visible. At least then they're acknowledging your existence. But the cruelest stage comes later, when they stop noticing you at all. That's what happened with her. I can pinpoint it to a handful of moments that should have been ordinary, but instead hit me like a quiet funeral bell. The first was at dinner one Tuesday night. I'd made spaghetti, simple, but it was something. I set the plates down and tried to tell her about a new contract at work. Not a brag, not even excitement, just me wanting to share a piece of my day. She nodded, eyes fixed on her phone, and said, "Mm-hmm," without looking up once. I finished my plate in silence, wondering if I'd said the whole thing out loud or just imagined it. The second was more subtle. We were at the grocery store, standing side by side in the cereal aisle. We'd done this dozens of times before, debating brands, joking about which one had the least sugar. That day, I reached for a box and turned to her with a smile, but she wasn't looking at me. She was scrolling through her messages, laughing softly at something someone else had said. I realized then that I could have walked away, left the store, even vanished from the world, and she wouldn't have noticed until she needed me to push the cart. The third came on a Sunday morning. I was mowing the lawn, sweat dripping, the hum of the machine filling the air. She sat on the porch with her coffee, sunglasses on, scrolling her phone. I waved once, out of habit. No reaction. Not even the reflexive little smile she used to give me years ago. It was like I wasn't part of the picture anymore. That's when it hit me. She didn't see me. Not really. Not as a man. Not as a partner. Not as someone she once promised forever to. I was background. The walls, the furniture, the hum of an appliance you stop hearing because it's always there. And the worst part? I realized I'd let her train me into it. I had accepted sarcasm as love, humiliation as humor, absence as independence. I had shrunk myself so much that by the time she stopped seeing me, there wasn't much left to notice. So, when she sat at that kitchen table and told me her birthday wish was for me to disappear, I understood. Because in her eyes, I already had. Birthdays are supposed to be lighthearted. Cake, laughter, candles glowing in the dim of a dining room. A moment to feel celebrated, even if only for a night. That's what I wanted for her, even after all the years of sarcasm, the humiliations, the long nights out. I still wanted to give her something. So, when I asked her that morning at the kitchen table, "What do you want for your birthday?" I was expecting anything but what came out of her mouth. "You disappear." Flat. Simple. Not said in jest, not even softened with a smile. Just delivered like a grocery list item. For a moment, I sat there, spoon hovering above my coffee, waiting for her to add a wink or a chuckle, something to tell me I'd misread the tone. But nothing came. She picked her phone back up and went back to scrolling, like she'd just given me directions and moved on with her day. That sentence was the sharpest knife she'd ever wielded, and she didn't even raise her voice. It wasn't the sarcasm of the past. It wasn't a humiliating quip at my expense. It was a request, a declaration. Her birthday wish was freedom from me. I can't explain the cocktail of feelings that hit me in that instant. Numbness, mostly. But underneath, there was something else. Not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. For years, I'd been waiting for the moment where things snapped back, where we'd reconnect, where she'd finally see me again. But her wish at that table was proof that there was no snapping back. There was no us left to salvage. It was over. She just didn't have the courage to say the word divorce. She didn't want me as her partner anymore. She wanted me gone, erased, invisible. So I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I didn't beg her to explain herself. I let the silence stretch between us until she shifted in her chair, annoyed at my lack of reaction, and got up to leave the room. The words replayed in my head all day. You disappear. And the longer they sat there, the less they felt like a wound, and the more they felt like permission. That birthday line didn't just end us. It gave me the clearest instruction I'd ever heard from her. And for once, I decided I'd give her exactly what she asked for. Silence has a way of doing the heavy lifting when words fail. That's what carried me through the days after she made her request. I didn't confront her, didn't circle back, didn't ask her if she really meant it. She'd already answered that, by not retracting it, by not softening it. I let her words hang in the air like smoke that never quite cleared. And in that smoke, I began to see the outlines of a decision. Not the kind you announce with slammed doors or angry declarations. Not the kind you confess to friends over beers with your voice shaking. This was quieter, like packing away winter clothes at the end of the season. A slow recognition that the time for this was over. I started observing her more carefully, not with suspicion anymore. I'd already burned through that phase, but with resignation. Watching how she scrolled her phone during dinner, thumb flicking while I sat across from her like furniture. Watching how she dressed up for nights out, but barely brushed her hair when she was home with me. Watching how her laughter seemed reserved for anyone but me. And each observation was another nail in a coffin I'd been pretending didn't exist. The old me, the man who used to crack jokes to get her attention, who used to plan little trips in the hope she'd light up like she once did, he would have tried again. He would have heard "you disappear" as a challenge to fix things, to prove his worth, to fight harder. But the man I'd become, he was tired. Tired of humiliations framed as humor. Tired of being ignored at tables where I once felt like a partner. Tired of the hollow ache of lying next to someone who had long since stopped reaching for me. So, I made the quietest decision of my life. I would give her exactly what she wanted. I wouldn't rage. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't demand an explanation she'd only twist into another cruel joke. I would simply leave. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't drama. It was clarity. If her birthday wish was my absence, then her gift would be granted. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't make me feel small. It made me feel free. There was no storm, no shouting, no slammed doors. Just me, moving quietly through the house we had once called ours, gathering what I needed like a man slipping out before dawn. I didn't pack everything. That would have been too loud, too final, too obvious. I chose carefully, just the essentials, the things that reminded me of who I was before I became invisible. A few changes of clothes, my work boots, the old leather jacket I'd had since college. I took my notebooks, the ones where I'd written down her jokes at my expense, not because I wanted to cling to them, but because I wanted to remember. Proof for myself that I hadn't imagined the erosion. I left the wedding photos on the walls, the gifts I'd given her, the furniture we picked out together. All of it could stay. Those things belonged to the version of me that kept trying. The man who thought the right gesture could turn her eyes back toward me. That man was done. The house was eerily cooperative that night. No creaks in the floorboards, no dropped objects, no interruptions. Even the zipper of my duffel bag moved quietly, as if the house itself was helping me along. Every so often, I'd pause, half expecting her to walk in from another girls' night and catch me mid-motion. I wondered what she'd say if she did. Would she mock me for being dramatic? Would she shrug, say "finally," and move past me without care? Or would she, in some rare flash of vulnerability, ask me to stop? I didn't know, but I didn't fear it either, because the truth was, her reaction no longer mattered. When the bag was zipped and propped by the door, I sat for a moment on the edge of the couch. The same couch where I had spent so many nights waiting for her laughter to return home from somewhere else. I ran my hands over the armrest, the fabric worn smooth by years of hoping, of enduring. Then I stood, turned off the light, and walked toward the door. There was no note, no explanation left behind. She didn't need words from me. She'd written her own when she looked me in the eye and said, "You disappear." So, I did. Not with fanfare, not with a bang, just a man carrying a bag, stepping into the night, finally following through on the request that had ended us. And for the first time in a long time, the silence that followed me out wasn't heavy. It was liberating. I half expected silence, for her to wake up, find the space I'd left behind, and shrug, maybe even relish it, proof that she'd gotten exactly what she asked for. But people rarely know what they're asking for until it's given to them in full. She noticed quicker than I thought. The first morning, she texted me, "Where are you? Did you leave early for work?" I didn't respond. By noon, another came. "Your stuff is gone. What's going on?" That was the first time I let myself smile in weeks. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because the confusion in her words told me what I already knew. She hadn't expected me to actually listen. For years, she had chipped away at me, pushed me into corners with sarcasm and dismissals, and I had stayed. I had endured. She thought this would be the same. Day 2 brought a phone call. I let it ring until it stopped. A voicemail followed, her voice sharp at first, then faltering. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. Call me." But it wasn't a joke. For once, the punchline wasn't mine to swallow. On day 3, the tone shifted. Messages piled in, longer, softer, trying to coat over the years of indifference. "I just want to talk. We can fix this. You're overreacting. Please come home." But the thing about leaving quietly is that it isn't overreacting. It's the purest reaction there is. It's the end of excuses. I imagined her walking through the house, opening closets, noticing the gaps where my things had been. I pictured her staring at the empty hook where my jacket used to hang, at the nightstand drawer that no longer held my notebooks, at the couch cushions that still carried the faint outline of my weight, but no longer my presence. And I wondered if she felt the echo of her own birthday wish in those spaces. She wanted me gone. And now she had it. But from the confusion in her voice, I realized the truth. She hadn't been prepared for a world where her words carried consequences. I had been invisible to her for years, but the moment I truly vanished, she finally began to see me. The first night alone, in a small rented room with just a bed, a chair, and my duffel bag, I thought the silence would crush me. For years, I had imagined leaving, but imagination always painted it as unbearable. Me staring at 4 empty walls, haunted by what I'd lost. But it wasn't like that. The quiet was clean, not heavy like the silence back home, where every pause at the dinner table carried judgment, every unspoken word was a stone between us. This silence was different. It belonged to me. I woke up the next morning without her alarm going off, without the sound of her phone buzzing with late-night conversations I wasn't part of. I stretched, breathed, and realized my chest wasn't tight for the first time in years. Peace is a strange thing when you've lived without it for so long. It doesn't roar in, it creeps. Small comforts hit hardest. Making coffee and drinking it hot, not lukewarm because I was too distracted by her sarcasm to sip it. Playing a record she always rolled her eyes at, and letting the music fill the room without apology. Watching the game without bracing for her to sigh and tell me I was predictable. I found myself talking again. Not to anyone in particular, just to myself, to the air. Narrating my cooking, laughing at a memory, even humming along to old songs. Little things I'd stopped doing because somewhere along the way, she made me feel like my voice wasn't worth hearing. Work felt lighter too. I wasn't carrying the weight of wondering where she was or who she was with during her girls' nights. My head was clearer. My jokes landed with coworkers again. One even said, "You seem different, less tense." They were right. At night, I slept deeply. No turning to an empty side of the bed. No waiting for the sound of the front door creaking open at 2 a.m. No cologne that wasn't mine clinging to the sheets. Just me and a bed that didn't carry the ghosts of betrayal. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to earn peace. I already had it. And with every sunrise, I realized the cruelest truth of all. Her birthday wish had set me free. It didn't take long for the regret to set in. Not mine, hers. The first week, her messages were sharp, defensive. "This is childish. You're making a scene. If you want attention, congratulations, you have it." But as the days stretched, her tone softened. Anger gave way to desperation. The texts turned into calls, the calls into voicemails. I'd play them sometimes, not to torture myself, but to hear the shift in her voice. It was like listening to the stages of grief, all condensed into a series of recordings. The first ones carried irritation. "You're really going to ruin our marriage over a misunderstanding?" The next, guilt-tripping. "After everything I've put up with, this is how you repay me?" Then the fear started bleeding in. "I don't know what to tell people. My parents are asking questions. Just come back so we can talk." And finally, the breaking voice I'd never heard from her before. "Please, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean what I said that morning. I don't want you gone. I don't know what I want, but I don't want this." I listened to that one twice. Not because it moved me, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining the tremor in her voice. The same woman who once looked me in the eye and said her birthday gift wish was my absence was now crying into a phone, begging for my return. But here's the thing about regret. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't undo the years of sarcasm, the humiliations disguised as jokes, the nights she chose everyone but me. And it sure as hell doesn't erase the sentence that shattered everything. You disappear. Those words can't be unsaid, and I can't unhear them. I didn't call her back. I didn't text. I didn't rush in to soothe her the way I once would have. Because the man who used to crave her approval, who bent himself into shapes trying to win her softness back, that man was gone too. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one drowning in regret. She was. There's a strange kind of freedom in being erased. At first, it feels like loss, like being cut out of a photograph. But once the sting fades, you realize you've been handed a blank page. Her birthday request, that I'd disappear, wasn't the curse I thought it was in that moment at the kitchen table. It was permission. Permission to stop living as a punchline. Permission to stop waiting for love to return where it no longer lived. Permission to walk away without apology. The weeks after I left, I learned the rhythm of my own life again. I woke up early and ran by the river, the cold air filling my lungs without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down. I cooked for myself, simple meals, but ones I actually enjoyed. I bought a small plant for my room, watered it every morning, and for the first time in years, I felt like something in my space was growing instead of decaying. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, no longer waiting for her texts, her moods, her demands wrapped in sarcasm. The silence that followed me wasn't emptiness, it was peace. Her regretful calls kept coming for a while, then slowed, then stopped. And when the silence finally became mutual, I didn't ache for it. I welcomed it. Because I wasn't her shadow anymore. I wasn't the man sitting across from her at the table, invisible until she needed a target for her humor. I wasn't the husband left behind while she laughed her nights away with others. I was just me. And that was enough. I realized then that the greatest gift wasn't her absence of cruelty or her sudden, too-late regret. It was my own absence from her life. The gift she thought would set her free ended up setting me free instead. So I live now as my own gift. Not someone's punchline, not someone's shadow, not someone's afterthought. Just a man who finally disappeared from where he was never truly wanted and reappeared in his own life, whole, scarred, but finally free.